sometimes it's good to just think about for your own self-awareness and self-worth and knowing that you're enough just the way you are. It's sometimes good to also just do your own.
Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, where each week we talk about ideas for raising kids who become thriving adults. I'm your host, Audrey Monkey. I'm a summer camp director, writer, and speaker, and I've had the privilege of working with thousands of children, teenagers, young adult counselors, and parents over the past 3 decades. My husband, Steve, and I are raising 5 kids who currently range in age from 15 to 25. So my interest in raising kind, optimistic, self-reliant kids who become thriving adults is personal as well as professional. Hello, Sunshine Parenting listeners. I am so excited to bring you this week's episode. So this episode was recorded as part of a follow-up meeting to the Raise Thriving Kids workshop that Sara and I did back in September. We did a live workshop. We had 16 participants and we spent the whole day together. And it was just a fabulous day of talking with other like-minded parents and comparing notes and figuring out how we can address the challenges that we all face raising our kids. Part of the workshop included 4 follow-up online Zoom calls with Sara and me. And this was part of our final call where we covered year-end reflection activities. I really appreciated the input that Sara Kuljis and Kate Rader, our other participant, shared on this episode. And I hope it inspires you to try something to reflect on your year that is finishing before you launch into this new year. I think the things that I end up researching and writing about are things that I need to learn most for myself. So my kind of basic personality and set point is I'm a planner. I'm a goal setter. I'm an achiever. I like doing things. I like new projects. I'm really fueled by that. I get excited about new things, writing books, doing podcasts, all this stuff really fires me up. And so something that I really need to be intentional about is the other parts of me. And some of the activities I've learned and started practicing over the past about 5 years have really been helpful and have been things that I think could be really encouraging for other people too. So I have this post that I wrote and it's called 5 year-end reflections. And basically for most of them, you can really just do it on your own. Some of them are family activities, so you have to enlist some, support from your family. But so I'll just kind of talk through some of them, and I'd love to hear your, input or additional ideas because I'm sure, when you hear ideas, you get spurred on to other ones. So the first one is what's called a reverse bucket list, and this is such a great thing. It's kind of like a gratitude list, only when you do your very first one. So like if you do one, you look back over your whole life and you think about what are the cool things that I've already done. So, a lot of times people think about writing this bucket list. That's this long list of places you still want to go, degrees you want to get, or whatever, these lofty goals, lifelong things. But when you take the time to sit down and just make a list of what has already happened in your life, you've birthed a child or 2, you've overcome some kind of illness, you've, found the love of your life, you've, you volunteered to help a group of something, it's just, you start listing them, you're like, oh my gosh, especially the older we get. Like I'm 52 now, so I have a half a century of things to be thinking about and saying, wow, that's pretty cool. So what it does for me, like when you do this, is you just kind of breathe this big relief, like, oh, okay, so I don't have to feel like I have to constantly strive. Get out of the mindset of what's next? What are my goals for 2020? It's instead just taking some time to think about, wow, I've already had so many good things in my life. And it really, really ups your gratitude
So once you've done one, so I did one initially about 3 years ago that was sort of like the life stuff. I've started to do it more, not at a set thing, but more of like an annual or sometimes even a quarterly thing. Like, especially if I'm feeling overwhelmed, like, oh no, I didn't get to all these things that were on my to-do list this month because I overshot my goals, which is a tendency of mine. I can sit there, and I've done that before. I've looked, it was like, I think the beginning of last year when I had so much, it might've been this year even, where I had so much going on with like book marketing and parents and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, I really didn't do all the things I had planned. So I sat there and I wrote, what have I done? And it was like this reverse list. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot to have done in January, February, and March. So what are your thoughts on this concept, or have either of you ever tried doing the reverse bucket list of what you've already done?
I haven't tried it. I do have something sort of along those lines. I keep a folder of like kudos, and it's things that like emails that I've gotten from like literally my boss in my very first job, to I'll print off some like text messages that I've gotten either from my husband, who is not a very huge words of affirmation guy, or just friends who have said kind things, so that when I'm having kind of one of those days where it's like, gosh, like I couldn't get anything on my to-do list accomplished, I can always go to that folder and sort of have a little moment of, I have had some success, even though I didn't get the washer fixed today and the dog didn't get the long walk like I anticipated, and, X, Y, and Z didn't occur. There are still things. So it's a version of that, but I like your idea a lot, Audrey.
Oh my gosh, that's another year-end reflection that you just came up with, Kate, because honestly, I squirrel away all those things too. Like at camp, we do warm fuzzies and, I get notes from people and I just kind of stuff them all like, in a folder. But what about if another activity could be really taking like a year's worth of the fun texts and cards and nice messages and, putting them somewhere that's like in a little scrapbook or something. And just as a great like boost. I love that idea so much, Kate. Thank you for sharing that. Sara, how about you? Have you ever tried anything like a reverse bucket list?
Not formally. I think, we do have our gratitude ritual, which probably covers a lot of that. But I love the idea, especially of sitting down with the whole family and saying, let's look way back, because there is a chance that something that I didn't consider very buckety might have been really, really significant to my kids. When Sasha was turning 5, we said, what would you like to do for your birthday? And she had recently gotten into a TV show that happened in San Francisco. And she said, I want to have birthday cake on the Golden Gate Bridge. Well, we were planning anyway to go up to the Bay Area to visit some friends. And so we planned it on the weekend of her birthday, and we stopped off and got cupcakes, and we walked with our little 5-year-old to the middle of the bridge, and we all had cupcakes in the middle of the bridge. We don't usually get around to things so whimsical and silly during the year with, chasing 3 children with 3 different interests and running our own company and all that stuff, right? But to this day, that is one of the highlights of her life. And I think that I really want to try a reverse bucket list, but with the whole family, and see what shows up from the kids. And I do agree, Audrey. I think it will remind us that, wow, it has been a rich, rich life of experiences. They're different than other families have. We have odd ones, and we haven't done a lot of the groovy things that other families have. But I think it's a pretty long list if we take a look at it. And that would probably be good for all of us to feel content and grateful in a new way. So I'm going to try that.
I don't know. I think it kind of helps identify your family values too, because what we prioritize as families, to your point, is different than what other people do. And I think that sort of solidifies, gosh, like a good old fashioned like Monopoly game night with like fun snacks means a lot to us. Whereas to, the people next door, it might not. So I think doing that exercise actually also sort of helps you identify what matters to you as, the Rader 5 or the, whatever your family dynamics are. So I think it serves multiple purposes, actually.
That's a great point.
So you guys are funny because you segued into basically my next reflection because so my other thing that I've been doing, we started this in 2008 in my family, and I call it 100 family memories. And what you do is you brainstorm what happened this year. And I think it's I would like to say to you guys, I think using the 100 family memories as sort of your family reverse bucket list is a great idea, but I would challenge you to focus on yourself for your own reverse bucket list, only because I think maybe especially as moms, I see you guys both going straight to how can I apply this to my family, which is great. I really do think that sometimes it's good to just think about for your own self-awareness and self-worth and knowing that you're enough just the way you are. It's sometimes good to also just do your own. So I would suggest that the bucket list idea is more of a personal thing because it's like goals you've already achieved, cool things that you've done. Whereas like the 100 family memories would be things you're grateful for, funny, whimsical memories, that Monopoly night, that cupcake on the bridge. Those would all come up in this conversation with your family as you brainstorm together what was significant for us this year. And of course, accomplishments will be on there. Somebody graduated or somebody's soccer team did something, so those things for sure get on there. So I think it is kind of like a family bucket list, but I would suggest that those are two different activities. So does that make sense?
I actually appreciate that exhortation.
So for the 100 family memories, we have done it different ways, but honestly, the easiest thing has been just a legal pad that we keep flopped on the kitchen counter or the dining table it used to be when my kids all lived at home, it used to be for like the whole month of December. And we'd sit, over dinner the first night and my daughter has super duper neat writing, usually wanted to be our scribe. So she would do the writing, but we would easily come out with 25 or 30 things the first night that we do the brainstorm, because it would be all the big events, like somebody got their driver's license and somebody got stung by a bee. And they're both the good things that happened or the bad things, like somebody got sick and missed something or whatever. But then it gets harder because first of all, you're like, wait, January, what was happening then? And so then we just kind of leave the pad out and we revisit it a few times at dinner, but we also just leave it out for people when we're in like pairs or three of us sitting together, like, oh yeah, that needs to go on the list. So we'll just kind of keep adding, but the goal is to try to remember 100 things. So you get down to some kind of minutia because and those are some of the funny ones are, random individual things that happened. So that's been a really fun practice. Actually, the last couple of years, we haven't gotten to 100 because we've only been together for the holidays. So I've managed to get us to like 57 or something like that. So it hasn't been as effective now that the kids are all out in the world. One of the times I tried to do a Google Doc, which was a total flop. And it's not really the intention of the thing. I was like, let's start while we're not together. And won't we bond over this, Excel spreadsheet on Google, and nobody put anything in there. So we had to do a paper one anyway when we were together. So I would recommend just doing old school legal pad, whatever, jot down, or index cards on a bulletin board. I mean, it could be anything like that, but I think just something that's really visible and is short term, like just for a couple weeks in December or the last week. And just, it's a really fun activity. So would either of you guys think about trying that?
I think it's a great idea and it's a fun way to reminisce and a fun way to even, I think, get to know our kids as far as what they remember and what they treasure, because we always tease, like there was a time where we took our kids up to Seattle. We wanted to see the Space Needle and we wanted to go see the flower fields, and we went to this treehouse hotel, which was because of a show we watched called Treehouse Masters, and they have a treehouse hotel up there. And so we thought this was just the bee's knees and we were like going to have the most fun. And when we got home, they claimed that their favorite part was the indoor pool at the Sheraton. And so it was funny because we would never have anticipated that, and yet that was memorable to them. And so I think when you allow each family member to sort of share their treasured memories from the year, it gives us insight into their personalities and their level of value of priorities as well. So I'm excited. I've heard you talk about that before, Audrey, on one of your podcasts or maybe an article, but I appreciate the reminder because it's perfect timing at this time of year.
Oh, great. Thank you. So Sarah, what you were saying?
Oh, well, first I was going to say, Kate, we watched that show and we have wanted to go to that hotel. Was it worth the trip?
It's so cool. We did not stay there because you have to be, I think, 16 to stay overnight. We just did the tour, but Sarah, it is so cool. It is quite fun. Yes, I cannot recommend it enough. And the kids did enjoy it, but it just made us laugh. We said, gosh, we could have just stayed in Costa Mesa at a hotel with an indoor pool.
Right.
Yeah.
Audrey, last Christmas, you had encouraged our family to do a 100 Memories notebook. And I was actually probably last week thinking about when we're all back together at Christmas, that's a time to start it. And even my older dudes, when we get back together, they're kind of more in that nostalgic kind of family mood anyway. And I think taking advantage of the few weeks we have together over the holidays might just be ideal. And I really like your recommendation of just leave it out on the counter, because, not all of us think on our feet, and things come and dawn on us. And then it kind of becomes this fun little competition about who wrote the last thing. And I just, kind of taking away the pressure of we're going to sit down and do this thing. Sometimes it's the same as like taking a family photo. Sometimes the best photos were the incidental candid ones where when you sat down to take the family photo, darn it, now smile. Those were not as, authentic. So Anyway, I may just make that happen over Christmas.
Okay, fun. Me too. If my family's listening, we are doing it this year. We're going to get to 100 again. Like we used to. We were consistent from like 2008 through 2017, I think. And I save every single one. I have these legal pads with all of the memories, and they're so fun. Well, that's great. I love the 100 memories. Okay. So my next thing, number 3, and these are all, again, I don't suggest that anyone does all of these things. These are all just ideas of maybe you pick 1 or 2 that resonate with you. So like in my book, I just don't want people feeling overwhelmed like, oh my gosh, now I have more things to do. I want these to be just fun things. And I really agree, Sarah, the delivery, if you're doing something like 100 Memories, cannot be, all right, family, gather round. We're going to spend the next 3 hours remembering, that's not going to be fun. You have to make it light, and you have to allow them to put really silly things on the list. So, that's part of it, is not making it, it's not a serious thing. It's just a fun thing. And I do think, because my memory is just not that great and the years have all kind of muddled together, I really like pulling out the old ones and going, oh, that happened that year. Oh yeah. You kind of, even if you went on a trip or something or a little weekend thing, that will show up then on the list. Okay. So number 3, and this is just something that for me really resonates. It's picking a quote of the year. So it can be something that, like a quote that's resonated with you that kind of speaks to this year, if you want to pick something like biblical, if you're Christian or religious, or you want to do that, or just something motivational. I think both looking back as a reflection or looking forward, or both, picking some kind of quote that you want to live by is really cool. An alternative is my number 4 one, which I've also got Sarah and her family to do, which I am really, and I'm actually a huge proponent of it. It's called One Word. It's become a really big deal. A lot of families or individuals, even at workplaces and now at schools, some schools have their students pick it. So if a quote is kind of too lofty and too much and can't really find the right one, I think picking one word that you want to guide you in the new year and spending some time at the end of this year really thinking through what was good about this year. What is it that I want to take into the new year and feel just like more of, or, do more of. So I love the process. I have a lot of resources, and I'll put some links to the resources, but there's a lot of different ways to think about selecting the word. Again, it doesn't have to be super deep, but you can go deep if you want to. So in my family, we started the family tradition of doing this 3 years ago. I did my own one word for 1 year and really liked it so much that at the end of the year, I told everybody, okay, on New Year's Eve, we're all going to reveal our one word for the following year. And it was kind of like we kept them secret. So we could talk about different ideas with each other, but we made it secret. And then we went around the table at New Year's Eve and shared our one word. And that has been really, really fun. And even people who normally aren't very, don't really share a lot, often just when they shared their word and why they picked it has been a really eye-opening and meaningful moment to see what's on their mind, what they're really wanting for the coming year. So I love the process. And some of the recommendations when you're picking your one word is to focus on being rather than doing. So it's not you don't want it to be this constant reminder of what I should be doing. instead like this aspirational, like inspiring you, like I really, I want to bring more peace into my life. So here are some things I'm doing. I'm going to read some books. I'm going to, you're going to find resources, just like this reminder. My daughter learned lettering, and one year she made us all pretty little drawings of our one word. Another daughter of mine gave me a little, like a key that had my one word on it. And so you can also use them as really neat ways to, like, if you know someone else's one word, you could use it on gifts and as a reminder. So I just love it so much. The other tip is to be authentic. It should reflect you and no one else, not what you think someone else thinks you should be picking or anything. It's really easy. This is why we don't talk about them with each other, because if you listen to other people's words, you might be like, oh, that one sounds really good. And you want it to be uniquely yours. So that's why you might have this huge list of ideas maybe to pick from to make it easier, but really you want it to be just you figuring it out for yourself. So for me, of course, I do a bunch of journaling and I think about, oh, maybe this, maybe that, so, but for some of my kids, they literally just think of a word. So I overthink it, which number 3 of the tips under picking one word is don't overthink it, which I do, but I like that. I like reading about things and researching. So it's fun for me, but there's no wrong answer. You don't have to analyze it to death, and there'll be another year, hopefully, God willing, that you can pick another word. But a lot of it just comes with like, determine the kind of person you want to be the next year. Identify like characteristics of that best self, like when you're being your best self, what does that look like? And then you pick a word. So that's like my favorite of my recent activities. And it's one that's meant a lot to me. It's guided me a lot because once I pick a word, I then seek out resources and ideas to help me live that word better. So do either of you have any experience with picking one word?
Well, I do, because Audrey, you had my family do that with you last year. And my word was risk. And I just wanted to put myself in some new situations this year to kind of stretch me. And I have done that. And every time I do, I think, Audrey, this is your fault. And in the best way. And my husband has totally, really, it helped define some things he wanted to do with his year. And he has shared it. I've heard him share it, his one word with, I think 4 different times, and how that helped fuel him. And I was surprised at his conviction around it. And it was awesome. So that's definitely, for my kids, I still think they're like, I don't know, but that's okay. It's building a new tradition.
Yeah. So have you ever done this, Kate?
I did actually. And it's funny that you said about the key. My word was nurture. I wanted to nurture myself a little more because I have a tendency to put everyone else first. And I wanted to nurture my relationships. So my relationship with Jeff and my relationship with each child, but also just friendships, girl friendships, and make that a priority. And so I think when you're excited, like when you talk about it, people hear. And so a girlfriend bought me a little bracelet with the word nurture on it. And every time I looked down, it was just a reminder of, am I taking that time? Like, am I truly actually following through on what I said I was going to do? And so I think some years those words come more easily than others. One year I picked thrive. I wanted to thrive instead of just survive, but some years it's hard. Like some years you feel like you're kind of plugging away and you don't necessarily have one that jumps out at you. So it's interesting when you find those years that you have one that really resonates, how meaningful it can be. So I love the idea as well. I think it's a neat way to put focus on how you're going to spend your time and your energy and your reading and your, research and all that good stuff. So
how many years have you done it, Kate?
Those are the only 2 words that I really remember resonating with me. I'll be honest,
Okay.
Audrey. I think some years, like you mentioned, I look at a long list first and I can very easily cross a lot of them out because they don't speak to me in that given year for whatever reason. But those are the 2 that are most memorable. I think I've picked a word 3 years, but I think the other word, clearly, I can't even remember what it was. So it clearly wasn't that meaningful. But I think this would be my 4th year going into 2020. And it's good to start thinking ahead of time because, to your point, it's not one of those things that I can't just choose spontaneously. Like I kind of want to spend some time because when it is meaningful, it really does carry you through the year and it gives purpose to what you're spending your time with. And, I met with a life coach years ago and she asked me to identify my 5 top priorities in life and then translate that to how I was spending my time. And what I realized is it doesn't always equate. I say that my 5 priorities are X, Y, and Z, but I'm doing A, B, and C for 80% of my time. And so that word, I think, really can help to me at least. Continue to be honest and truthful about, is saying yes to this nurturing me in any way or nurturing my relationships? Well, then maybe I need to say no and spend some time nurturing, So I think it's a great thing. I really appreciate the reminder and the fact that you've had success with it too. So.
Oh, I love that. Well, my word for this year, my other words, it's funny because I think I've forgotten maybe the first one I did before I shared it, but I know I've had breathe and peace. So you can see the theme. I tend to be a little stirred up a lot. So I'm always trying to calm things down. This year I picked the word focus. And I think it was because I read the book by Cal Newport called Deep Work in December last year. And it was really hit me that my best contribution to, my family, the world, whatever, really comes when I focus. If I take some time to do some research, do some reading, writing, just thoughtful time, which is not a normal part of life anymore. It's not, you have to actually build in focus. I'm good at focusing actually, but I don't do it a lot unless I make myself now. You have to be very intentional. So that's why I picked that for my year. And, it's been fun because you don't fail at your one word. It's a reminder thing. You say, oh yeah, I'm going to circle back to that. So, I've tried Pomodoros this year, which are, you set a timer and you do a break. And I've done a lot of, turning off the phone and doing, trying sitting in different places and cleaning my desk off and, just various things. But it's been good because that word, I'm like, remember, you're focusing, you're trying to focus. That's who you are. You're anyway, so I love it. So that's great. Okay. So then we're having so much fun chatting. We're going on and on. But my last thing, and this is again, really relevant for me, is to kind of remember your own favorite books or resources from the year. I tend to be a huge consumer of information. I read a lot of books. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I go to conferences. I'm this sponge for information, but I tend to not take enough time to let it percolate and then figure out, okay, but what was the one takeaway or the one thing? So now in the talks and workshops I do, I really am intentional. What's one thing you're going to actually do? Because you hear all these ideas and there are so many wonderful things, year-end reflections, all these things that you can do, but really to move the needle, all you need to do is just one, So I am challenging myself this year to kind of slow down on the consumption of new information this month and instead get out the books that I've read, look at my highlights and sort of recap. And one of the ways that I'm doing this in a tangible way, because I've also learned as an author how important reviews are. Best-selling authors don't really worry about it and they have thousands of reviews. But when you're just a new author and not very well known, every single review kind of gets possibly your book to more people. So I'm going to take time to go back my books this year, and the ones that I haven't written a review, my recap will be looking at the book, looking at my highlights, remembering what I loved, and then writing a 2-sentence review and putting it up on Amazon and Goodreads. And that is so I think that remembering your favorite books or doing kind of your own best of, because sometimes the lists on Goodreads, I was talking to one of my daughters and this book that she didn't really like, that's all over the place. I've had one of those this year, and I don't talk about books I don't like just because I'm more of a positive person. I don't want to spend, but there's been a couple of books that I've read this year that were really touted on lists as best of. And they were not my best ofs for the year. There were other ones that are not as well known that I really liked. So so that's my thing, my remembering my favorite books of the year, and also just remembering what I read this year, because that's also, going back to January and thinking about what was I listening to and reading back then is kind of cool. So what do you think about that idea of sort of your best of, or do either of you have something that when you look back over this year, a book that's oh yeah, that's when I want to reread or look at my highlights?
I love getting those ideas, and yet I couldn't tell you. And so I love the idea that I could have a year-end list of books that I'd read. And just little notes, nothing crazy, but, just my 100 books along with my 100 memories, So I think that's a great way to recap the year and have a sense of accomplishment, honestly, because there is something to be proud of having kind of digested that information and done what we want with it, So I love that idea.
Kate, that is awesome. You broke up a little bit at the beginning, so I'm just going to reshare that you said How to Raise an Adult, which was Julie Lythcott-Haim's book, and Present Over Perfect, which is Shauna Niequist. And it's so funny because Present Over Perfect is currently my reread on my bedside table, because the other thing that I've realized is because I read so much, I really need to reread things that, I read it 3 years ago. It was really meaningful, really hit me. Got to get it back out again and look through it. And these are all pretty short. That's a pretty short book. And another one like that is 1,000 Gifts. That's a good reread to remind you of things. Sara, how about you? What are some of your memorable or favorites from this year, podcasts or books or whatever?
There's just, I'm like you. I'm a high input person. And so I probably have too much and too many. But what I have been a little more intentional in doing, and I realize this falls into that, is to be intentional about recommending books or podcasts or articles to others. And as I am doing that, I'm reminding myself, that one really moved me this year. In fact, just yesterday, I Amazoned a book that was really meaningful to me this year to 2 different friends. They don't know each other, but it dawned on me that was meaningful to me. I said, hey, you're going to receive this given what life experiences happening for you right now. I just thought this might be meaningful to you. And so that has been a great, and before I'm doing that, I'm actually going through my book and going, okay, was there a page I would recommend or a sweet? Anyway, so that kind of is driving a long ways today. And I said, please Finding Fred, which is a podcast about Mr. Rogers that I just finished binging and is absolutely delicious. And so in recommending others, I'm revisiting things. And then it brings me a lot of joy, frankly, to share those with other people.
That's awesome. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Sara and Kate about some year-end reflection activities. As always, you can find show notes and links to everything we talked about in this episode by visiting my website at sunshine-parenting.com. Search for episode 119. If you'd like to be sure not to miss any of the resources, podcast episodes, and posts that I share at Sunshine Parenting, be sure to subscribe to my email list while you're there. For another easy way to subscribe, you can text the word HAPPY to 345-345. If you're looking for some fun new ways to connect with your family and help develop the character traits and skills your kids need to become thriving adults, I encourage you to pick up a copy of my book, Happy Campers: 9 Summer Camp Secrets for Raising Kids Who Become Thriving Adults. Here's an excerpt from the introduction of Happy Campers. My experience using these secrets isn't limited to my job at summer camp. I have used these camp techniques in my own home, so I have seen that they're applicable not just around campfires in the mountains, but also at home while living our day-to-day, ordinary family life. I am honored to share these ideas with you in the sincere hope that you can create the positivity and happiness of summer camp at home and have your own happy campers. By implementing these ideas, you can create a family culture where your kids feel connected, capable, confident, and loved in that most important and sacred of all places, home. Happy Campers is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. You can find out more information by visiting happycampersbook.com. Thank you for joining me on this journey to raise a generation of kids who become thriving adults. I'll be back next week.